If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside in the workplace, this is the channel for you. Every week, we share powerful stories of quiet strength, professional resilience, and hard-earned victories, stories that remind us it's never too late to stand up for what's right. Whether you faced betrayal from a boss, sabotage from a colleague, or simply fought to be seen for your true worth, you'll find inspiration and hope here. Don't miss out on these empowering journeys. Hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see your own. And if you've ever lived through something similar, share your experience in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice and build a community where every struggle, every triumph, and every lesson matters. Subscribe today and be part of the story. I remember that moment as if it had happened just this morning. I was standing by the coffee machine in the marketing suite, stirring a dash of almond milk into my dark roast, when Madison, the new CEO and daughter of the company's founder, walked into the break room. She didn't greet me, didn't smile. She just stared at me like I was a dusty chair that hadn't been moved in years. Then, out of nowhere, she barked, "Elena, I need you in my office." Now, it wasn't a request. I had worked at Silvergate Strategies for nearly 12 years. In that time, I had built the partnership development department from scratch, secured over 120 contracts, and mentored almost every team member who now sat in cubicles just outside Madison's glass-walled office. But none of that mattered to her. Madison's father, Mr. Pierce, had built this company through perseverance and loyalty. Madison inherited the title and apparently believed it gave her the right to act like a queen. I followed her down the hall, trying to push down the tight knot rising in my chest. She didn't even sit behind her desk when we arrived. "You're fired," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "We don't need deadweight holding this company back." I blinked, stunned. For a split second, I thought it was some twisted joke. "Excuse me?" I asked quietly. "You heard me," she replied casually, flipping through a stack of reports like she was choosing an appetizer. "You can gather your things. Leave immediately." I stared at her, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the ticking wall clock. I wanted to shout, to argue, to demand an explanation. But instead, I smiled, calm, polite, deliberate. "Understood," I said softly. "Have a nice day, Madison." I walked out with my head held high, even though inside, I was shaking. My teammates glanced up as I passed. Some stood, their faces filled with confusion, ready to ask what had happened. I gave them a slight shake of my head. "Don't make this harder," my eyes told them. I packed up in silence. As I drove home, the weight of those 12 years pressed against my chest. 12 years of late nights, working through Thanksgiving, missing birthdays, answering client calls during my divorce hearings. I'd given everything to Silvergate. And now, I was tossed out like I never mattered. But oddly, I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious. The why haunted me all night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look Madison had given me. Something didn't add up. The timing felt strange. We were days away from finalizing the Blue Horizon contract, the biggest deal in company history. I had spent 7 months preparing for it. I knew the client's entire leadership team by name, had flown cross-country 3 times to negotiate face-to-face, and had even scheduled the final review meeting for Friday at 10 a.m. And now? I was out. Had Madison even read the deal details? The next morning, just after 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. I hesitated, but curiosity won. "Elena, it's Mr. Pierce." The sound of his voice jolted me upright. The real CEO. The man who had hired me over a decade ago after a single coffee interview. "I just walked into the office," he said, his tone tight with frustration. "Why the hell did you pack up and leave? What happened?" I swallowed. "Madison fired me." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "When?" "Yesterday. She said I was lazy and no longer needed." There was another pause, this one longer. Elena, he spoke slowly, like trying not to raise his voice. Did she even read your contract? I frowned. What do you mean? She's supposed to finalize the Blue Horizon deal today, isn't she? Yes. The final review is at 10. Jesus Christ. I heard papers being shuffled aggressively, then a loud slam as if he'd thrown a file down on his desk. Elena, your contract has a clause, he said, his voice sharp with urgency. I made sure of it after that Redcrest acquisition fiasco. You're not just the account manager, you're the sole authorized negotiator for Blue Horizon. Legally, no one else can close that deal without you. I froze. She didn't read it, did she? Mr. Pierce asked. A slow burn started to build in my chest. No, she hadn't. Madison had fired me without even understanding the implications. And, just like that, the sting of betrayal shifted into something deeper. Not anger. Not sadness. Control. Mr. Pierce sighed heavily into the phone. I'll handle things here. Be ready, Elena. I sat quietly in my apartment, staring at the phone even after the call ended. And for the first time in 12 years, I realized they didn't control my worth. They never had. I sat frozen, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and quiet triumph. Madison couldn't close the deal without me. Mr. Pierce's voice carried steady resolve as he continued, legally, ethically, practically, she's not authorized. The whole thing collapses unless you're there. A slow, simmering awareness bloomed in my chest. She hadn't read the contract. She had no clue what she'd set in motion. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The sting of betrayal was still there, sharp and undeniable. But now? Now I felt something else entirely, leverage. She'd pulled the trigger without aiming, and now the recoil was coming straight back at her. Mr. Pierce hung up abruptly, the weight of his fury lingering even through the silent pause that followed. I sat still on my worn armchair, a half-full mug of coffee cooling on the side table, my eyes unfocused on the pale morning light spilling across the floor. She fired me without even glancing at the paperwork. I leaned my head back, letting out a soft, bitter chuckle. 12 years. This was how it ended? Brought down by a reckless heiress playing CEO like it was a board game? But companies don't play by imaginary rules. And Madison was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I didn't know what was coming next. Part of me wanted to pull on a blazer and walk straight into the office, just to watch the consequences unfold. But another part, the part that had quietly endured late nights, canceled plans, holidays spent at my desk, wanted to let them unravel without me. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:15 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it flashed Madison's number. I let it go to voicemail. Moments later, another call lit up the screen, this time from the receptionist. Then legal. Then finance. I watched as the phone vibrated relentlessly, notifications piling up like an impatient drumbeat. I didn't pick up a single one. When the voicemail icon blinked insistently, I tapped it open. Elena, it's Madison, her voice strained, trying to sound composed but wobbling at the edges. There's been a mix-up. I may have acted prematurely yesterday. We really need you back today. It's urgent. Please call me. Urgent. The word bounced in my head like a marble in a jar. Not sorry. Not I made a mistake. Just urgent. Panic dressed up as professionalism. I took a slow sip of my now cold coffee, still not moving from my seat. At 10:34 a.m., another call came through, this one a number I hadn't seen in years. I answered. Elena? It was Carla, an old colleague, her voice barely above a whisper. You won't believe what's happening here. Try me, I said quietly. Madison just got torn apart by Mr. Pierce. In front of the entire executive team. The conference room was packed. He stormed in with the Blue Horizon contract in his hand. I raised an eyebrow. He brought the contract? Oh, he did, Carla confirmed. And he asked her one question. Did you even read this before you fired Elena? I could almost picture the scene. Madison tried to bluff, started talking about new visions and restructuring. But Mr. Pierce wasn't buying it. He flipped straight to the clause. You know, the one you always made sure stayed in every renewal, the clause naming you as the sole negotiator for Blue Horizon. That clause was never just a formality, I murmured. Exactly. Everyone knew about it. Except Madison, apparently. Carla paused, and I could hear the faint hum of office chatter behind her. Elena, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. It finally hit her she's the reason Blue Horizon is about to walk away. I exhaled slowly. And what did Mr. Pierce say after that? He told her, clear as day, if this deal falls apart, your role here is on the line. A breath I hadn't even realized I was holding finally escaped my chest. The first crack in her armor. I don't know what you're planning, Carla added carefully, but whatever it is, you've got the upper hand now. I smiled faintly. Thanks, Carla. As I ended the call, I stood and walked over to the window. The city skyline stretched quietly under the mid-morning sun, steady and indifferent to the chaos unfolding inside that glass tower downtown. I'd always found comfort in that, how life kept moving, no matter who stumbled. The city skyline stayed steady beyond my window, unmoved by the chaos brewing inside Silvergate's headquarters. There was something reassuring about it. Life went on, no matter whose world was unraveling. At 11:20 a.m., another message popped onto my screen. This time, it wasn't Madison. It was Mr. Pierce himself. Elena, I'm truly sorry for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in not just for the Blue Horizon deal, but so we can talk privately. I stared at the words. It was tempting. After all, I'd worked here 12 years. But I wasn't ready to walk back in like nothing had happened. Madison's mistake wasn't just a careless decision about a contract. It was a violation of respect, of trust. I had given years of dedication, loyalty, and sacrifice, years that couldn't be patched over with a hasty phone call and a seat at the negotiation table. Still, something stirred inside me. I wasn't someone who carried grudges, but I wasn't naive either. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. I picked up my phone, hesitated for a moment, then typed out a reply, not a phone call, but a message. I'll consider returning to finalize the Blue Horizon deal, but only under specific terms. I'd like to meet with Mr. Pierce privately first. I hit send. Then I stood, walked to my closet, and exchanged my sweatpants for a blazer and slacks. By the time I arrived at Silvergate's towering office building, it was just afternoon. I didn't slip through the side entrance where the employees clocked in. No, I walked straight through the grand lobby, like a guest. Like someone who no longer belonged, but wasn't afraid to claim her space anyway. Heads turned as I passed. Everyone had heard. Everyone knew Madison had fired me the day before. My return wasn't just an errand. It was a statement. The receptionist stood up the moment I approached. Ms. Ramirez, she stammered, wide-eyed. Mr. Pierce is waiting for you. Right this way. I followed her down the marble hallway. The air felt different. Conversations hushed as I walked by. Keyboards stopped clicking. The atmosphere was tight, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mr. Pierce was waiting at his office door. His expression was serious, lacking the warmth I once associated with him. Elena, he greeted, nodding. Thank you for coming. I nodded back, but didn't extend my hand. He stepped aside, letting me enter first. I sat down across from his large mahogany desk. He closed the door behind us, leaned against it for a moment, then sighed deeply. I made a mistake, he admitted. A serious one. I gave Madison too much authority too quickly. I wanted her to earn her leadership, but I didn't expect her to destroy relationships before learning how to build them. I remained silent, letting him speak. He lowered himself into his chair. His voice softened. What she did to you wasn't just wrong, it was unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly, it jeopardized a deal we've spent over half a year preparing. I nodded slowly. Yes, it did. I reread your contract this morning, he continued. Every line. You were granted full negotiating authority on the Blue Horizon account. Legally, the client won't recognize anyone else at the table. That clause was included for a reason, I said quietly. He met my gaze. You were the one who managed the fallout after Redcrest collapsed. I haven't forgotten. Neither have I replied. You didn't deserve what happened yesterday, he said firmly. I'd like to offer you your position back, with complete authority to close the deal. Whatever conditions you need, I'm willing to meet them. His tone carried sincerity and regret. But this wasn't just about salvaging a contract. This was about leadership, respect, and dignity. I'll return, I said carefully, but I want everything in writing. A revised agreement. Complete autonomy over Blue Horizon. And no interference from Madison. He nodded immediately. Done. And one more thing, I added, my voice steady. This can't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone. A quiet moment passed between us. Then he gave a thoughtful nod. You have my word. I stood. When I stepped back into the hallway, I spotted Madison down the corridor, arms folded, pretending to discuss something intently with a junior analyst. But the moment she saw me, her eyes locked on mine. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I walked right past her. And in that fleeting second, I saw it, the flicker of realization across her face. The exact moment she knew her control was slipping. By 1 p.m., the boardroom was ready. The conference room was prepped, every seat arranged, and the Blue Horizon delegation had just arrived. We had half an hour before the official session began. I sat quietly at the head of the table, reviewing the finalized documents one more time, making sure every clause reflected the careful negotiations I'd led over the past months. Their CEO, Mr. Sharif, was a sharp, no-nonsense leader with a reputation for spotting disorganization a mile away. He valued integrity above all, and if he sensed instability, he wouldn't hesitate to pull the deal. I placed the printed Arabic translation of the agreement neatly at his seat, a small but meaningful gesture of respect. As I arranged the folders, I caught sight of Madison pacing outside the glass walls, her steps quick and agitated, like a lioness trapped in too small a cage. Then Mr. Pierce stepped into view, intercepting her. Their muffled voices filtered faintly through the glass. It wasn't long before his hand lifted sharply, signaling her to stop talking. Her face flushed a deep shade of red. She turned, glancing over her shoulder, locking eyes with me for a moment, a flicker of humiliation and frustration crossing her features before storming away down the hall. That was the last I saw of her that day. At exactly 1:30 p.m., Mr. Sharif entered with his advisors. I rose to greet him, speaking a few words in Arabic. His face lit up, a rare, genuine smile spreading across his usually stern expression. You remembered, he said warmly. Respect is never wasted. I inclined my head. It was important to me. The meeting began. Every point, every term we had meticulously prepared fell into place. Not a single misstep. 2 hours later, we shook hands across the polished table. The contract was signed. Done. After the delegation departed, Mr. Pierce approached me once more. This time, his expression carried genuine relief. You saved us, he said, his voice heavy with gratitude. And I owe you more than an apology. I met his gaze. You owe this company a leader, I replied quietly. Someone who understands the weight of power and the responsibility that comes with it. He didn't argue. Later that evening, walking toward the parking garage, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, the strain of the past 48 hours finally easing. I hadn't returned as just another employee. I had come back as someone who knew her worth and demanded it be respected. But I also knew this wasn't finished. People like Madison don't vanish quietly. They withdraw. They scheme. They wait for the next opportunity. By the following week, the Blue Horizon partnership had made headlines in every major industry publication. Landmark cross-border agreement, one read. Silvergate secures historic collaboration with Middle Eastern firm through multilingual strategy and cultural intelligence. They didn't mention my name, but inside the company, everyone knew who had brought that deal home. My inbox overflowed with quiet acknowledgments. Notes from colleagues who'd once kept their distance, now congratulating me in hushed tones. Messages from juniors I'd mentored years ago. Even a few middle managers who used to sideline me in meetings suddenly praised my calm leadership under pressure. I appreciated their words, but I wasn't naive. I knew how quickly praise turned with the tides. Around the office, the atmosphere lightened. Conversations sparked again in the break room. Laughter returned. Mr. Pierce had made it clear that Madison was no longer involved in key decisions for the time being. And yet, I couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. It started subtly. First, my travel reimbursement for the Blue Horizon meeting was inexplicably delayed. Then, documents I'd submitted for approval came back unsigned, no explanation given. Next, an email, apparently sent from my address, was flagged by IT. It contained incorrect figures and, worse, had been forwarded to one of our international partners. Thankfully, the partner reached out to me directly, confused, asking for clarification. But the damage had already planted a seed of doubt. I reported the incident to our internal systems team. They ran their checks. There's no evidence of external interference, they told me. Whoever sent this, it came from inside. That's when the truth settled in my gut. Madison wasn't trying to fire me anymore. That method had failed. Now, she was working to discredit me, to quietly unravel my credibility. Little by little, with subtle sabotage. She was trying to make me look careless, untrustworthy, until either I walked away in frustration or someone higher up decided I was the liability. It was corporate warfare. Slow, precise, calculated. But what she didn't realize. I had seen this playbook before. I knew what this was. It wasn't incompetence, it was strategy. Madison wasn't trying to push me out the door with an obvious termination. This was a slower tactic, more insidious, classic corporate sabotage. And sadly, it wasn't the first time I'd witnessed it. Fresh out of graduate school, my first boss at a marketing agency had played the same game. He never confronted people directly. Instead, he stripped them of resources, quietly removed their names from projects, whispered doubts about their competence in leadership meetings. By the time anyone realized, the damage was irreversible. The target would resign out of frustration or be labeled ineffective. And then they'd be gone. But I wasn't 24 anymore. And this wasn't my first rodeo. I wasn't going to fade into the background or vanish quietly. I started documenting everything, every delayed approval, every file that mysteriously went missing, every email I never sent but was blamed for. I kept meticulous records in a private logbook, writing down dates, times, conversations. I knew from experience, in environments like this, a paper trail was stronger than emotions. One late afternoon, as I passed the executive lounge, I heard voices coming from inside. The door was cracked open just enough to catch snippets. "She's unstable," Madison's voice carried, louder than she probably intended for a semi-private conversation. "Ever since Elena came back, she's been unpredictable. Emotional. I'm worried about her ability to handle high-stakes accounts." I froze just outside the doorway. "I'm just saying," Madison continued smoothly, "maybe it's time we start considering a transition plan for client strategy. She's clearly stretched too thin." Another voice responded. I didn't recognize it, probably one of the newer directors. "I don't know. She did close the Blue Horizon deal under serious pressure." Madison let out a short laugh. "Please. That was luck. We can't build an entire division on chance." I stood still for a few moments, the weight of her words sinking deep. Then I walked away quietly, my heart steady but cold. This wasn't reactionary. She was methodical, planting doubts one conversation at a time. Quietly poisoning the well. That evening I stayed long after most had left. The building was quiet, the halls dim, lights humming softly. I sat alone in one of the smaller glass conference rooms, staring out at the skyline as dusk settled. How many more battles would I have to fight just to do the work I was hired to do? A voice startled me. Still here. I turned. It was Mr. Pierce, standing at the doorway. I could ask you the same, I replied. He stepped inside, placing a folder on the table. Your updated contract, he said. Everything we discussed, written, signed, official. I opened it, scanning the clauses carefully. It was solid. I nodded. There's something else, he added. I've initiated an internal audit. I looked up sharply. Too many irregularities have been flagged lately, he explained. Our eyes met across the table. You've noticed. I'm not blind, Elena, he said quietly. I know Madison isn't finished. Then why haven't you stopped her? I asked, unable to hide the edge in my voice. He sighed heavily. Because I needed to see how far she'd go. He sounded older in that moment. Less like a CEO, more like a father trying to hold together something fragile. You're trying to protect the company, I said softly. He shook his head. I'm trying to protect both of you. But maybe it's too late for one of you. I closed the folder deliberately. I don't need protection, Mr. Pierce. I need you to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave. His gaze lingered on mine, thoughtful and weary. Then he turned and walked away. And I knew something bigger was brewing. The office felt colder in the days that followed. Not from the temperature, but from the way the air shifted when I passed by. Conversations quieted. Smiles faded into polite nods. Some colleagues greeted me carefully. Others avoided eye contact altogether. The audit had begun. And everyone knew it. I hadn't asked for it, but deep down I was relieved. Finally, the truth had a chance to surface. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd been walking on eggshells since Madison took over. Still, I understood how this world worked. In corporate life, truth doesn't always bring justice. Sometimes it leads to quiet exits, golden parachutes, or gets buried so deep no one dares to touch it. That Thursday, a message arrived in my inbox. The audit committee would like to meet with you. The audit committee had set up a temporary workspace, a former supply closet now transformed into a strategy hub. Piles of files covered the folding tables. Computer monitors glowed softly, displaying charts and login records. On the far wall, a whiteboard mapped connections, timelines, and digital breadcrumbs. Jacob, the lead internal auditor, greeted me as I stepped inside. Elena, thanks for coming. We've got a few questions regarding some discrepancies. I nodded quietly and settled into the chair across from him. Jacob clicked a folder open on the screen. Let's start with this message, he began. It looks like it came from your account, but we traced it to a shared terminal near the break area. Whoever sent it manually logged in. I crossed my arms, feeling the weight settle deeper. So someone had my credentials, I said flatly. Exactly, Jacob confirmed. This wasn't phishing. This wasn't external. Someone inside accessed your account. I let out a slow breath. I reported this the same day it happened. A brief smile tugged at his mouth. And that was smart. We're glad you did. Because it wasn't an isolated event. He pulled up a second screen. We found similar incidents. Altered spreadsheets. Deleted approvals. Memos reworded. Every one of them traced back to communal devices. Always logged under your profile. A heavy ache pressed against my chest. It's coordinated, I murmured. Jacob hesitated, then gave a small nod. We think so. We've narrowed down who had access. And we noticed some irregular activity tied to Madison's executive assistant's login. I sat still, pulse steady despite the rising swirl inside me. Jacob's voice lowered a notch. We're not formally naming anyone yet. But the pattern is clear. Someone's been working to undermine you, and maybe others. I tightened my jaw. So what happens next? He leaned back, rubbing his temple. That's where it gets tricky. Mr. Pierce asked us to present everything directly to him. No edits. No filters. Full transparency. I nodded slowly. Then I'll be there. Jacob's eyebrows lifted. You're not required to attend. I'm coming, I repeated. If the truth's coming out, I want to face them head on. He didn't argue. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking of the employees who'd quietly vanished over the past year. Talented, driven professionals in their 30s and 40s, colleagues once touted as the next generation of leadership. At the time, I chalked it up to turnover. Now, I wasn't so sure. How many had been quietly pushed out by Madison's tactics? The next morning, I arrived early at the executive boardroom. Mr. Pierce was already there, standing by the window, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Jacob and 2 other auditors entered next, setting down files and laptops. 10 minutes later, Madison walked in, phone in hand, a confident smirk playing at her lips. That smirk flickered when she spotted me seated at the table. She paused at the doorway. She's not part of this committee, Madison protested. Mr. Pierce didn't even turn. She's here at my invitation. Madison shifted uneasily. This is supposed to be confidential. Internal. I spoke evenly, my gaze unwavering. Then you should have kept it that way before you used company systems to forge messages. Madison let out a dismissive scoff. That's absurd. Jacob cleared his throat. We've traced multiple unauthorized logins tied to your assistant's account. Every irregularity pointed at Elena's work follows a documented timeline. I watched the faint cracks appear in her composure. Her practiced indifference wavered. You're grasping at straws, she sneered. She's just bitter she couldn't handle the pressure. I held her gaze. You didn't push me out, Madison. You sabotaged me. And you nearly cost this company its largest partnership in years. Mr. Pierce finally turned. His expression was grim. I gave you responsibility, he said quietly. More than once. And all you've done is tear down the very people building this company's future. Madison's mask faltered. This isn't. No. Mr. Pierce cut her off. It's worse. A deep silence filled the room. Then, Mr. Pierce rose from his chair. The board will review these findings. Effective immediately, you're suspended. Madison's mouth opened, a protest ready, but no words came. Madison opened her mouth, ready to argue, but nothing came out. She looked at me, no longer furious, no longer smug, but stunned, as if she had finally grasped that her usual tactics weren't going to work this time. Her gaze lingered for a beat longer before she turned and walked out, her heels echoing down the corridor in silence. I stayed in my seat. Mr. Pierce let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging under the invisible weight. I failed her, he admitted quietly, voice heavy with regret. As a mentor, and maybe as a parent. You can't guide someone who refuses to grow, I said softly. But you can still guide this company. That choice is still yours. He lifted his eyes toward me, a flicker of resolve breaking through the exhaustion. He nodded once. For the first time since all this began, I felt some of the burden I'd been carrying begin to ease. 2 weeks passed after that meeting, but the ripple effects didn't fade. Madison hadn't returned to the office. Her signature smirk, once a permanent fixture of every department meeting, had become nothing more than a whispered memory among the staff. The board acted swiftly. The proof was overwhelming. Every falsified document, every unauthorized login, every mysterious disappearance of key files, all traced back to Madison or her close circle. Her suspension quietly shifted into a termination. The company issued no press release, filed no lawsuit. Just a quiet announcement citing violations of ethical standards and internal policy breaches. She left without fanfare, slipping out the side door of corporate history. But of course, the whispers spread anyway. I thought I would feel victorious when the news reached me. But instead, I felt calm. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Simply steady, like someone who had survived a long storm and could finally exhale. A few days later, Mr. Pierce called me into his office. "Close the door," he said gently as I stepped inside. He sat behind his desk, a folder resting in front of him. But he didn't open it immediately. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what's happened," he began, "and on what I want this company to look like moving forward." I remained quiet, letting him finish. "You've demonstrated more leadership in these past few weeks than many executives do in their entire careers," he continued. "You safeguarded our biggest partnership. You carried yourself with professionalism even under public scrutiny. You faced personal attacks with grace. That's the kind of leadership this company needs." He pushed the folder toward me across the polished wood. I opened it. Inside was a promotion letter. Director of Client Strategy. An executive-level position. Reporting directly to him. I stared down at it, surprised. "I didn't ask for this," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That's why you deserve it." I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If I accept this," I began carefully, "I want a voice in how we rebuild. I don't want to wear a title. I want to reshape the culture. The right way." A smile spread across his face. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." Later that evening, I sat alone in my new office, a temporary one while renovations were underway, staring at the blank nameplate outside the door. For years, I'd walked these same hallways wondering if anyone really saw what I did. The late nights, the near-missed disasters averted, the client crises solved quietly before anyone above noticed. I used to believe staying silent kept the peace, that avoiding conflict was the wiser path. But silence had nearly cost me everything. This wasn't just about a promotion or a contract. It was about remembering something I had almost forgotten. Competence is not arrogance. Strength isn't rudeness. Professionalism is not weakness. I had been dismissed, undermined, betrayed, but I had never been defeated. And most importantly, I hadn't let it make me bitter. That, to me, was the real victory. In the weeks that followed, I got to work. I reopened closed doors of communication. I reached out to employees who had been quietly pushed aside, inviting them back into conversations. I reinstated talented team members who had been unfairly excluded. And I implemented something we'd never had before, an anonymous reporting channel. So no one else would have to fear retaliation just for speaking the truth. I even carved out time for the younger staff. I made time for the younger team members, those just starting their careers, some of whom had quietly watched everything unfold. A few approached me softly, curious, asking how I managed to stay steady through it all. I gave them the honest answer. "You won't always get to choose the challenges that find you," I told them. "But you do get to choose the kind of person you are while facing them." As for Madison, the last I'd heard, she'd been interviewing with boutique agencies in another state. But her reputation seemed to follow wherever she went. There were whispers that Mr. Pierce had quietly stepped in, ensuring her departure stayed private. Maybe it was his way of protecting her, one final gesture of loyalty as a father. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. One afternoon, as I walked the corridor, I passed the glass conference room where the Blue Horizon deal had been signed. I stopped briefly, gazing through the empty space, memories flooding back, the sabotage, the frantic phone call, the rush of relief when it was all secured. That deal had changed the trajectory of my career. But the true shift happened the day I left Madison's office without begging, because that's the day I reclaimed my worth.